It's your open source advocate, and I'm back with another video. And today I wanted to talk about something that I've avoided intentionally for quite a while. It's a pretty hard topic to cover, particularly for me because I'm a fan of Linux, and it's one of those things that people ask me about all the time, like what desktop are you using, what environment are you using, those kind of things. And I thought, okay, it's time for me to cover this topic. It's a great open source project. It's one of the older open source projects you'll find out there in this day and age, and it's really an amazing project. It's got hundreds of thousands of developers behind it, and it's just absolutely terrific to see that it's grown as much as it has. But I think there's a lot of misconceptions about Linux as well, especially from folks who are still using Windows, people who are using Mac OS, people who just haven't used Linux in a long time, or maybe tried it once, 15 or 20 years ago and just didn't have the experience that they thought they might get. So I wanted to go through a few things about Linux today and, just ask the question, why not Linux instead of some of the other operating systems that are out there? Why not move over to something that's open? Today in 2023, and actually this is the end of November 2023 when I'm making this, I believe that Linux could replace any operating system in this day and age on the desktop, laptop space. I believe that it is fully capable of giving you everything you need out of an operating system, and I think that there's a lot about Linux that people still kind of have that old thought that it's just a terminal emulator, that you don't see anything else, that there's no graphical user interface, that there's no desktop environment, that there's nothing. And really, you couldn't be further from the truth. It's just an amazing operating system altogether. And as you see, I've got a beautiful desktop, and I've got my browser open, and I've got all my information and applications down at the bottom. And there's tons and tons and tens of thousands of applications made for Linux, and there's all kinds of web applications that run perfectly well on Linux as well as they do on Windows or Mac OS that you probably use all the time and don't realize that you could really switch. Now, if you're expecting to move to Linux and have the same exact experience as you're having on Windows or Mac OS, then you're setting yourself up for failure. But if you move to Linux with the concept in your head that it's going to be different, and it's different intentionally, then you're setting yourself up for success. One of the things that I love about Linux is how often it is given new updates and new features and things like that. Most of the different distributions that are out there are every 6 months. Some of the different distributions out there are a little bit more often, some a little bit less often. It just depends on what you want to get and what you want to run and what you're comfortable with. But that's the great thing about it, is you have that choice. So I wanted to get into some of the great things about Linux today, and I hope you'll stick with me. I think it'll be really good. It's a few little segments. They'll each be a few minutes long, and then you can kind of jump around in the video using the timeline at the bottom like always. And here we go. I want to say thank you to all of my subscribers and all of my patrons over at Patreon. Seriously, you guys make this so worth it for me to do these videos every week. I really, truly enjoy it, and I just can't say thank you enough. If you're enjoying these videos, subscribe. Let YouTube know that I'm doing a good job by subscribing to the channel. Plus, you'll get notified when I have new videos coming out. And finally, if you're enjoying what I'm doing, give it a like. Just click on that thumbs up, and that way YouTube knows that you like it, and they'll pass it along to other people that might enjoy my content as well. I really appreciate it. Thank you again. Let's get started. So Linux does updates just like any other operating system, just like Windows, just like Mac OS. But the Linux updates are very different in my opinion. So Mac OS just updates in the middle of the night, which is nice. It knows kind of when your machine's not doing anything, and it'll run those updates so it's not interrupting you. And generally it's not an update where it gets rid of anything. They have a really great system of taking a snapshot of what you were working on and then bringing it right back to where it was when you're finished with the update. Windows, in my experience, has always been a much more painful process, and still today supporting a few clients who use Windows in their IT, in their infrastructure. They're long updates. It's very strange to me that Windows updates always take so long to get done. I mean, 45 minutes to an hour sometimes just for a couple of updates that just take forever. They have updates that just do it on their own, even though you have things turned off to not allow that, which is super annoying. They have updates that you don't even know what they are. They don't even give you information. You have to click into several websites and start reading about what is it. Do I need it? It's called an optional update, but sometimes you're like, well, yeah, I should probably do it. And then those things take forever as well. So I think people are under the impression that, Linux might be the same or doesn't even have updates, one or the other. But this is the update screen, so I get a little indicator down here that tells me there's updates ready. It doesn't do anything until I tell it I'm ready, and then if you look, there's a little checkbox next to every single thing here. I can tell it, I don't want this, or I'm not ready for this one, or maybe I need to learn a little bit more about this before I let it update. But these are packages that are already installed. They're just getting their updates. So for instance, NetPlan, this is the networking stack. So this is going to get some updates. Up here where you see this Linux generic with the number, that's the kernel. That means that it's going to get an update, which is great because that's security updates, that's driver updates, that's all kinds of improvements to the Linux kernel that I'm getting. Now I want to run through this. This is a pretty decent list. You can see it scrolls quite a bit. And I want you just to see how long this takes. I mean, if this was a Windows update, I would expect this to be overnight, probably with this many updates going on. I mean, I know some Windows updates are fast, but 99% of the time they take quite a while. And a list this long, I would think, okay, I may as well go watch a movie, get a bite to eat, and come back and check it. So we're just going to click this button. It's going to start getting things ready, and the first thing it does is prompt you for your password to make sure that you're allowed to run these updates, which pretty much every operating system is going to do if it's updating things like the kernel for sure. So we'll go ahead and put in our super user password, and you'll see it starts going and downloading them pretty fast, and then it's going to start running through the updates, and you can see the total kind of how far it's gone over here. But here you can just see each item as it goes along, and as it finishes, it'll actually just disappear from the list for us. So you can kind of see the list changing over time. Shouldn't take very long, so we'll just kind of let this run. So there you go. It took about 45 seconds, and that was including a kernel update, which in my experience are usually the longest part of most Linux updates. And I would say that was pretty average. Some are faster, some take a little bit longer, maybe a minute, minute and a half, but I've rarely had updates that take longer than a couple of minutes. Now, depending on when you install the operating system, like if I was to install a 2204, which means it was released in April of 2022, so this would be a year and a half later. If I just installed plain old 2204, not any of the releases, the patch releases since then, and try to update, that might take 5-10 minutes just because there would be a lot of updates to go through. But as you go along and you get these updates in Linux, it's really pretty easy to update. There's nothing special you have to do. You just click the update button and it's done. If it did need, for some reason, to reboot the operating system, it would tell you that as well. You can see here's the refresh button. This just lets you click to say, like, go check and see if there's other ones. But if you saw it, it actually refreshed itself when it finished just to make sure that it got everything. Occasionally, if you take a while to get to this list of updates and then you do them, they may have released another one on top of that, so you might get a few extra, but it's rare that I see that. So there's updates in Linux. It's very simple, and no matter which desktop environment, in this case I'm running KDE Plasma, if it's GNOME, if it's Budgie, if it's Mint with Cinnamon, if it's Mate, it just any of them, it doesn't matter. They give you some kind of indicator that you have updates available, and then it's the same kind of thing. You'll open up a little window and it'll tell you, hey, you want to do it, and you click start and it'll run through it. It may prompt you for your password depending on the updates, and then it'll finish pretty quickly and you're done. One of the things about Linux that I think a lot of people mistakenly kind of get in their head is that it is what you're seeing here, which is just the command line. And in the case of a server, it might be. You might be running a server that doesn't have a graphical user interface because the command line is much lighter weight, and you can get everything done in the command line that you can do in a graphical user interface on Linux, which is really an awesome thing. So this is sometimes, I think, what people get in their head when you say, hey, why don't you run Linux? And they go, well, I mean, why would I want to do that? They want the graphical user interface. But the thing is, Linux does have desktop environments, which are the graphical user interface. So Windows desktop environment is Windows. It runs on top of the NT kernel, which was built on the DOS system at one point. So The same thing with Linux. Linux is really a kernel, and then you've got graphical desktop environments that run on top of that to give you different ways of interacting with the actual environment. So if you look here, this is my graphical desktop environment on a Plasma 5 desktop environment for KDE. I've got my start menu. I can go through it just like on anything and filter down to my applications, or I can just type what I'm looking for and I can find it pretty quickly and open it up. So really clean way of doing things that you're probably very familiar with if you've been a Windows user for a long time. We've got normal things. Your file explorer is here. You can create shortcuts. You can do things. You can dig down into your different file levels. You can see what else going on in your system. And if it has a little arrow, you can expand it and you can get the tree look, or you can double click to get into the folder itself if you really want to. It's very simple. It's meant to be very powerful, and it is, and you get kind of a tabbed look here at the top if you want to, or you can open up separate windows and drag and drop between them. The same kinds of interactions you would have in a Windows graphical user interface. You also have your little icons down here, your app icons, app indicator icons, plus your clock, date, time, everything like that. And you get notifications as things happen on the screen, just like you would in any other desktop environment. Now, the thing about Linux is there's multiple desktop environments that give you different graphical user interfaces and different ways of interacting with Linux. And I think that is something that puts people off initially too, is that they see all of these different options and they're not sure what they should go with. And I say that really depends on you as a user. If you're someone who just wants to get things done and wants to get work done, and maybe you're looking for a similar experience to your Windows experience when it comes to navigation, then maybe something like Cinnamon with Linux Mint, or Cinnamon is the desktop environment, Mint is the distro, and then maybe KDE for any desktop environment for any distro is maybe your speed, because they both have very similar kind of start and find things panels and similar way of setting up the application panel down here, the dock, if you want to call it that. Maybe you're somebody who says, you know, I really want to see something different. I want a nice clean experience. I'm used to a much cleaner experience. Then maybe GNOME is more your speed. So here I'm running in a virtual environment. I've just got this opened up in my Proxmox VE, so this is not part of that environment. This is the desktop environment here, so that's why you see the mouse kind of lagging a little bit. But you can see up here we've got the clock, and if we click, we've got our notifications area, and I've got some software updates ready. You can see my calendar and different events that are happening. And then over here we've got our application indicators again, plus all of our controls for settings, power, things like that, Wi-Fi, everything like that, or network in this case, not so much Wi-Fi. And then on the left side we've got what we call kind of our expansion, or what they call their overview. So if you click, you see it expands out. And I'll open up a few applications just so you guys can kind of see what this really does. So I'll open up again, you've got this nice file manager, pretty clear. You can open up your browser, and we can open up, and you see they go side by side. So it's kind of that paneled expose view is what Mac called it for a long time. It was a really nice view. I think they call it mission control now, is more what this would be. But then you've got this extra desktop environment over here that doesn't have those windows. So if I pick that one, it's clean again. And I can just mouse wheel between these. So if I just hover over that and move my mouse wheel, it moves between those desktop environments. It's very simple, very nice. And you can use hotkey shortcuts as well, just like you can on Mac OS or Windows. In fact, Linux was the first one to use virtual desktops. Mac OS, you had some add-ons you could put. Windows, you had some add-ons you could put for a long time. I think Windows, it came in with Windows 10 maybe, but Mac OS maybe around 2009 they added it natively. So Linux has had this as long as I can remember, actually. So it's a really, really awesome feature, and it's really useful for organizing all of the things that you might be trying to do in an operating system. So this would be your stock GNOME operating system, and then this is just a great way to work as well. So you've got different desktop environments that give you this really great graphical user interface, and you don't have to jump into the terminal anymore in Linux, which is a really nice thing about it. You just jump into this desktop environment and start using your software and using your computer. It's really great. I think people really still have that concept of Linux looks like this, and it doesn't. I mean, it can, but it doesn't have to. You can absolutely do everything through the graphical user interface that you can do here in the command line these days. And it's really, they've got some incredible graphical user interfaces. With Linux, I think a lot of people might be afraid that they won't have their communication applications that they're used to. Email, chat, video and audio conferencing, different things like that just make using a computer a much more powerful experience and a much more common experience in this day and age. And you couldn't be further from the truth if you think that, because Linux has web browsers. In this case, I use Firefox, but I also have Chromium, I have Google Chrome, I have Brave, I have Vivaldi. You have the entire plethora of browsers available to you that you have on every other application, or actually every other operating system except for Safari. There is no Safari for Linux, but that's because Mac doesn't make Safari for Linux. You can actually even get Edge on Linux if you really want to. It seems weird to me, but you can. So yeah, I've got YouTube right here, and then if we keep going, I've got GitLab set up, or GitHub if you want to get to it. I mean, it's just a web browser. There's nothing special about it. It does everything you need it to do. In this case, I log into my Rocket Chat using this browser window, but you can absolutely get into your Rocket Chat desktop application if you want to. So Jitsi Meet, this is where you can make audio video calls, and it's really an incredible thing. You can self-host it, of course, but yeah, I mean, again, works perfectly fine with Linux-based systems. And Slack, so again, you can download Slack and use it on your Linux system. Teams, you can download it, the Teams application, use it on your Linux system. Discord, you can download the Discord application and use it on your Linux system. Pretty much everything you can get on the other platforms, you can get on Linux and use on Linux in one way or another. Either you can do it through the browser, or you can do it through an application that you install just like you would on any other system. All of your chat platforms, your audio video calls and conferencing, everything like that is covered under the Linux desktop these days. Another one of the things that I think people kind of think down about for Linux for some reason is that Linux doesn't have an office suite, is the thought that they have a lot of times. And that's couldn't be further from the truth. So Linux has multiple office suites that you can choose from, and most of them are open source. So there's LibreOffice, there's OpenOffice, there's OnlyOffice. You have the online version of LibreOffice, which is Collabora. You just have so many different options built in for Linux that are incredible options and powerful options. Now, a lot of people say, well, that's not Microsoft Office. I want Microsoft Office. And that's kind of that's what they're used to, so they think that that's what they have to do their job. And it's not really true. I would guess that probably 90% of people who use Microsoft Office could move to LibreOffice or OnlyOffice very easily and continue doing exactly what they do and never know or care that it's not Microsoft Office, because Office suites that can do the open document format, that can do the open XML format, which Microsoft Office uses, can just interact with each other. So you can save things from LibreOffice into the Word.docx or the Excel.xlsx or the PowerPoint PPTX versions. You can do that from LibreOffice. You can create those things and save them in that format and send them to somebody else who does have Microsoft Office, and it will open up just fine, and they can make edits and changes and send them back to you, and it will open just fine. I would say there are those few occasions where they may have some kind of strange special formatting they've done that might look a little bit different between the systems, and sometimes that's a font thing. Maybe if you just fix the fonts in your system, it would work fine. But I mean, really and truly, it's rare that I see that these days. Usually it moves over perfectly well without any issues. And yeah, I mean, Office suites are plentiful in Linux. They are powerful in Linux, and you can do pretty much the same things in Linux as you can do in Windows. But if you're coming to Linux and thinking, well, that's a one-for-one switch, it isn't. And you shouldn't come here thinking that for sure. My goal is to let you know that maybe some of those things you've been thinking about Linux weren't quite accurate. But you should also come into it realizing that Linux is different, and it's different on purpose. It's different to make your experience better in 99% of the cases. Sometimes it's just different because somebody else made it. It's not made by Microsoft. It's not made by Mac or Apple. It's made by somebody else. But overall, there are tons of Office suites available in Linux, and you have tons of options to do anything you want to do. If I start a document, it's going to open up and I've got a document editor with all the tools. You can have the toolbar like this. You can have a sidebar. You can set it up so that you have the ribbon bar, as they call it in the Windows world. You can set it up so that it's got only the sidebar, kind of like the old version of Word for Mac OS was set up. You can set this and kind of configure it to look the way that you want and to work the way that you want, which is really a nice feature for me because it makes it easy for me to say, I still don't like the ribbon bar in Word. It is hard for me to find the tools that I want in a lot of cases, and this makes it really where I can see everything that I want to use very easily, and I can customize this to the way that I want and the way that I work. I love that. but definitely there are Office suites available on Linux, and I want you to know that they are powerful, powerful tools. So please don't let that be a reason that you think I don't want to move to Linux because I don't have an Office suite. I don't think too many people think this, but just in case you're one of those people who thinks you have to have Windows to do any kind of development, that's not true anymore. Most development these days can be done on Linux, Mac, Windows. It just doesn't really matter, but Linux absolutely has the capabilities of doing a lot of great development, and a lot of developers have been moving to Linux because it does have a lot of the tools that they want. But when you're looking for Linux development, if you're looking for an IDE, then they've got Visual Studio Code. They've also got the Android Studio that you can run natively on Linux. So not only Visual Studio Code and Android Studio, but also all of the things that NetBrains makes as far as IDEs run on Linux natively, and you can get those things and use them. Now, of course, if you're working on an open source project, you can ask JetBrains for a license for that reason. They make you jump through a couple of hoops, but it's not a bad deal, and I think they have a trial that you can use until that kind of goes through. If you're working on for-profit, for-profit type software, then of course they do ask you to license their software. But yeah, so JetBrains also runs on Linux, and they're really nice IDEs. I've tried them in the past, and they're really great. But you've got a lot of different options. In fact, you can just use the command line kind of tools that a lot of people love, which is Vim for development. Really powerful tools once you learn how to use them, and tons of people use those. They prefer them, in fact. So definitely developer friendly when you talk about Linux, and I think it's one of those places that a lot of people have moved to already. But if you're one of those developers that was kind of on the fence, then start kind of thinking like, wow, okay, maybe they do have some really great tools that I can use. I'll say that Visual Studio Code is really, really good, and in this case I use Codium, which is what Visual Studio Code is based off of, but you get a lot of the same packages, extensions, things like that make it a super useful IDE. So yeah, just be aware. Definitely for development for any kind of software, Linux is a great place to start, and it's great if you make software for Linux. We appreciate it, and I know the rest of the community does too. When it comes to video and audio on Linux, I think a lot of people still have the concept that things just won't work correctly, but that couldn't be further from the truth today. Most Linux distributions come with every codec that you need already installed, and especially the open source codecs always installed on most Linux distributions. But if you do have a codec that's not there, there's usually a codec available out there somewhere from a third-party repo. Sometimes you have to go get one just because it's one that's proprietary or something. But you know, most of the common formats, MP4, MP3, H.265, H.264, AV1, WebP, WebM, WebA, all of those things, they all work perfectly well on Linux and generally just out of the box once you install it and get it set up. So I left the recording software I'm using today just up and running. This is called Simple Screen Recorder, and it lets me set a lot of options and functions, and I can see a preview of what's going on along with the audio size, that's, you know, how loud my audio is, which is great. So this is one of the ones that I use quite a bit. But you've also got OBS, which is a little bit of a different type of audio setup that lets you kind of pick what things and what scenes am I going to see, and how am I going to record those things, and you can switch between them and transition between those scenes very quickly and very smoothly. It's really, really an awesome project, and a lot of YouTubers use this kind of stuff. Creators use this kind of application instead of something like Simple Screen Recorder. I just like the simplicity of Simple Screen Recorder, as the name suggests. We've also got video editing tools, so I use Shotcut, but there's other editing tools out there that are available for Linux. DaVinci Resolve is one that is used by professional video editors and movie systems and movie houses, and it runs on Linux natively. It is an impressive and incredible piece of software. It is not open source, unfortunately, but it is awesome, and a lot of creators use that one as well for editing their YouTube videos. It gives them a lot of power control, but I like Shotcut. I think it's amazing. It's got tons of power. You just have to learn how to use it like anything else, but really, really an incredible piece of software as well. I'm just going to close these out as we go, but if we look right here, this is our media player, so your audio player, and you can set up, you know, everything that you can do with any other audio player on any other operating system. You can set up playlists, you can do all kinds of really great things and a lot of really fun things, and even connect it to online sources and stuff like that. So really awesome little audio player here, kind of a nice iTunes alternative, I guess, for those of you who are used to that. I don't really know what people use on Windows, to be honest, but this is a really great one. When you're talking about movie playback or video playback of any kind, VLC to me is going to be your massive hammer that you're going to use to just watch anything with any codec. it just plays it. I don't think I've seen an error in VLC in 10 years or more. VLC is just a solid thing, and whether you're using Linux or not, VLC is available on Windows, on Mac, but also natively available on Windows, and a really powerful video player. Kubuntu comes with this one built in. I haven't used it much, but it seems to do the job just fine also. Just another video player, a great way to watch videos and do things that you're looking at, or playback, anything like that. So yeah, this one's also built in just out of the box. And then Audacity is a really powerful audio editor that again, after I make these videos, I use Audacity, and I use a few different effects and filters to help kind of stabilize my voice, because I do move towards and away from the mic to see the screen sometimes, and that throws things off. And for a long time, I got a lot of really negative comments from people. Well, not negative, but constructive comments from people about the audio. So I've tried to clean that up a bit in the last couple of years. And thanks to a really great viewer who got in touch with me and told me exactly how to do this. That's the reason that I know how to do what I'm doing. So I love the community, and especially when they help me learn something new and are constructive with what they help me with. It's awesome. But yeah, Linux has all of the audio, video capabilities you would want: recording, editing, playback, everything that you would expect from any operating system. It's here. It's in graphical user interfaces, and it's powerful. Absolutely incredible what you can do with it. So again, if this is one of those things that was holding you back from going and trying Linux, maybe it's time for you to look at these tools and see what you could really do, because I think you could open up the power of your capabilities with this one. So get out there and give it a shot. If you're in the enterprise and you've been holding off of moving over to Linux, or starting to think about making that migration to Linux, maybe it's time to do that. Again, Windows is great. They have the enterprise space pretty locked down. I totally understand that, and they have all the tools that you love, Active Directory and things like that that are really great. But you may not realize that Linux is really an incredible offering for the enterprise. You have Red Hat Enterprise Linux. It's literally called Enterprise Linux. It has support, it has licensing, it has everything that you need to get you up and running. And I just wanted to let you know that it has user provisioning and profiles and all of the things that you would expect to get out of an Active Directory system, where you would pay per cal and per user and per core and per whatever the hell else they want to charge you for. It's a little bit different with Red Hat. It's a lot easier pricing model. It's probably going to be less expensive over time. And I hate to say that it's less expensive, because anytime you're migrating from one system to another, you have to be honest with yourself and honest with your company and honest with your shareholders and stakeholders and everybody involved, that moving is a mindset. Change is a mindset. Change management is very important, because you're not just saying, hey, we're just going to jump over to this new thing and everybody's going to be happy and it's going to work exactly like it did. And you shouldn't expect that, and you shouldn't set your users' expectations to be like that. You should let them know it's going to be a change. You're going to learn, and you're going to learn together, and you're going to work through the little things. But the great thing about these enterprise offerings is that they have teams to help you do that. They have support, like literally call in and get support. They have support contracts to help you do that. And Red Hat's not the only one. Ubuntu, the guys Canonical who make Ubuntu, they have this as well, and they have it for the enterprise. You can see that they've got enterprise options, they've got developer, they've got the community. If you just want to jump over there and see if you can find the answers, there's tons and tons of answers, and the questions you have probably definitely already been asked. But they do have enterprise support, and you can get that, and it's going to be a lot less expensive monetarily than what you're paying for the Microsoft level support and the Microsoft CALs and the Microsoft this and that and the other. Again, the expense is not just monetary. The expense is change management, and it takes time to change, and it takes time to get everybody moved over, and it takes effort. There's an expense that's involved with that. I don't want to mislead you. I don't want to misstate that. But at the same time, over time, it does become less expensive if you run things correctly and you do that change management well. It's just absolutely incredible. They give you their SLA here. They tell you what their customer involvement is. They have all kinds of resources for you to look at. So, I mean, this is a really enterprise-ready system and an enterprise-ready solution. And I think you'd be amazed at what they offer and what they have to say to you. So if you're somebody who's been looking and you're thinking, why in the world would I want to move my team to Linux? We're already on Windows. We've already got all the blah. It might just be the right move for your company. It might be the move that helps your company move forward. It might be the move that helps your company say, you know what? We're going to take back a little bit of control of our computing situation. I wanted to point this out because this is always one of those things that people come back to me and say, well, we're enterprise, we can't do that. Well, we're a business, we can't support that. Well, we're this, that, the other, we can't do that. If you're worried about controlling those machines, there's companies out there that help you do that as well. MSPs have all kinds of tools that help you do things, and you can use those tools too. I'm not saying you need to hire an MSP. I'm saying you can look into those tools and find those tools and use those tools to help keep track of your Linux systems. But really and truly, Red Hat has amazing tools for that already. There's nothing to go and do extra. Canonical has amazing tools for that already. There's nothing to go and do that's extra. But maybe you're a smaller shop and you're like, well, I don't need an enterprise level system. Even for your small business, they have tools that you can go out there and get today that are open source that will let you just get up and running and see what you think and try those tools out and learn about them, because they're not going to be just set it up and it's done. They're going to take a little bit of education. That's just part of the process. But at the end of the day, if you say, you know what, I do want some support, they have support levels for you as well, and it's still going to be a lot less expensive than what you're going to pay to Microsoft or some other shop to do that for you. So I wanted to talk about the enterprise very briefly, just because it is an important topic when you start talking about Linux and why not use Linux. It's one of those things that comes up almost every time when people say, why not use Linux? So I wanted to point out that there are definitely solutions and options out there. It's always about change management. So keep that in mind, whether it's just you as a person or you as a business or you as an enterprise, it's always about change management and keeping your mindset on the fact that it's different, and it's different on purpose. Something else that Linux has that a lot of people don't think about or don't ask, or think that it doesn't have it for some reason, is it does have multiple user support. You can create multiple user accounts on Linux just like you can on Windows or Mac OS, and different users can log into their accounts to use the same machine just like you do on Windows or Mac OS. The other thing that Linux does support is Active Directory based logins. It's really pretty easy to get it set up actually, and when you're doing the install of the operating system on the machine, you can set it up, or you can create a new user afterwards and set it up as well. This is just one of those things that I feel like, again, kind of gets overlooked or overshadowed sometimes because people think it's either not able to be done or it's too complicated to do. And in actuality, it's very easy, just like it is on Windows, to set it up and add it to the domain and make sure that everybody can log in through Active Directory, or at least everybody has multiple user accounts or their own user account for that system if it's your family or family members, things like that. I think one of the biggest ones that people don't realize is available on Linux is gaming. Steam is available for Linux. You can install Steam, you can install your games, and tons of games are available on the Linux platform that used to be Windows only, but now are very playable on the Linux platform as well. And it's due to a lot of things that Steam has actually been kind of spearheading in the background and making sure things are moving forward. And a lot of that is because of this device here, which is the Steam Deck. If you haven't seen it, it's an awesome portable gaming device that lets you just kind of play your games from your computer to the mobile device, to different ways to do it, connect it to the television, use your television as a larger screen device. Really an amazing device actually, and not too expensive, but at the same time really awesome because it runs Linux. It runs Linux on the device, and it runs Linux for the gaming on the device, and that means that all those games that run there will run on your other Linux systems as well. So gaming isn't really an issue anymore for Linux. Now, sometimes you get a AAA game that's only for Xbox or only for PlayStation or only for some PC brand, and that's because they make the deal with the company who made the game to kind of get that exclusive title, at least initially. But it does eventually come to the other platforms, and Linux is going to be one of those platforms, and Linux is going to be one of those things that people are really looking for. So if you're concerned about gaming, if you're a gamer and that's really a concern for you for switching over to Linux, I would say definitely check it out, see what games you play, see what's there and available for Linux before you just decide that it's not for you or it's not the way you want to go. I think it's definitely an option these days for people to look at and say, oh wow, I can actually play games on Linux. That's amazing. I want to do that. So don't let that be a hindrance. The final thing I want to leave you with is really more about what Linux isn't. So I've told you what all Linux can do, what all it can do for you, and how it might be a great fit for you in the long run. But I also want to make sure that you understand that Linux is not Windows, and it's not intended to be a full-on apples for apples replacement to Windows. They're different, and they're different intentionally. Windows is a perfectly fine operating system for people who are willing to deal with the things that come along with running Windows on your system. Windows has a real lack of privacy respect, I guess is the best way to put it. They don't want you to have privacy, in my opinion. They want to get as much data from you and set up ads so that whenever you open your start menu to try to look for an application, you also see ads there. They're advertising to you and they're getting paid for those advertisements that show up. That's not something you'll see on Linux. When you have to create a Microsoft account in order to log into your own computer, think about this. You have to create a Microsoft account to log into your own computer. And I know some of the people that are Windows lovers are going to say, well, you can get around that. Well, you can work around it. Yes, you can. And I know how to do it. And I've done it for people. But it's not the thing that the average person knows how to do. It's not the thing that the average person says, you know what? Why am I not able to log into my own computer that I just bought without having to use an internet connection, without having to create some account for Microsoft? And there are people who will say, well, there's benefits to having that Microsoft account. There may be some. But I would prefer the choice to say I would rather have a local account. And they don't give you that on certain versions of Windows unless you know how to work around their system. And it is not simple, it is not straightforward, and it is not something for the normal average person to do. So that's one of the things that I do enjoy about Linux. One of the things is Linux does not update without telling you. It will tell you that you need updates, but it will make you take the action to actually run those updates. Now, you can set up some automatic updates in the background if you want to. Windows, even if you haven't set up automatic updates, sometimes installs updates without asking you. Windows has been known to upgrade a person completely from Windows 7 to Windows 10 without letting them say, I don't want that right now. It was a huge problem, and it still is a huge problem for a lot of people. Also on Linux, there are many different versions of Linux, but if you want Ubuntu, you just get Ubuntu. There is no Ubuntu Home, Ubuntu Pro, Ubuntu Business, Ubuntu Enterprise, Ubuntu Super Guy. It's just Ubuntu. You get it, you install it, you use it. If you want a support contract, call Canonical and set up a support contract, and you can have support with Ubuntu. With Windows, you have to decide what do you want. And if you buy a computer at a store like Walmart, you're probably going to get Windows Home, and then you have to pay to upgrade to Windows Pro to get certain features that will work on Windows suddenly. It's not that the features aren't there, they just make them not work for you. So that's what Linux is not. Linux, when you get it, is Linux, and that's just how the operating system works. Now, there are some folks out there like Zorin OS who say, hey, here's our free version, you can use it, but if you want some of these other themes that we create, we'd like you to pay us to help support the project. 100%, that's on them, that's up to them, and that's up to you if you want to pay for those things. So that's my overview of why not Linux. I hope that I piqued your interest. I hope that if you're not already using it, you'll think about trying it out and giving it a real shot. It's kind of hard, it's difficult. It's not something where you should feel like I'm just going to dead on quit Windows and move over to Linux. You should make a plan, take your time, make sure that you're setting yourself up for success, and you'll be successful. There are literally hundreds of YouTube channels out there that are dedicated to Linux, and they all have videos about moving from Windows to Linux, and they all have different paths that you can take and different ideas that you might want to take from. So get out there and educate yourself, really learn about it and understand it before you try to make that move, and you'll be ready for success. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, like, subscribe, tell your friends about it so they can come along on the journey with us. And I'll talk to you next time.